Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take the most complex, acclaimed, and source-rich subjects, and we boil them down into the pure, high-grade insights you need.
And today, we are absolutely strapping ourselves into the RV for a full-throttle chemical analysis of one of the greatest television series ever made.
That's right, Vince Gilligan's monumental creation, Breaking Bad.
This is a series that didn't just tell a story. It constructed this meticulously detailed narrative architecture, just rich with psychological depth and iconic symbolism. We have a huge stack of analysis and research to draw from here.
Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're conducting a full cycle analysis of Walter White's life. We're going to move chronologically, season by season, connecting all those colossal plot points, the chaos, the casualties, the moral breakdowns, with the profound analytical context that really tells us why these things happened and how they transformed him.
And at the heart of the show, you have this core thesis, right? The audacious narrative experiment Gilligan famously pitched. He wanted to transform the protagonist from Mr. Chips,
the mild-mannered, repressed high school teacher.
Exactly. Into Scarface, the monstrous, ego-driven kingpin. It's a tragedy that was always intended to be finite and irreversible.
And that journey unfolds over 5 seasons. But here's a fascinating detail right off the bat that just establishes the show's dark poetry. The total run is 62 episodes.
62. And our sources remind us that 62 is the atomic number for samarium.
Samarium.
Okay, so why is that important?
Well, because samarium, specifically the isotope samarium-153, is used in the palliative treatment of, and you probably guessed it, lung cancer.
Wow.
It's the perfect morbid summation. The very catalyst for Walt's entire criminal career is linked directly to the thing that is chemically and narratively driving him toward his own destruction. It's a clock that is ticking from the very first frame.
It sets the stage for a story of, terminal disease and terminal morality.
Mm-hmm.
And the setting itself, Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's this arid, visually distinct backdrop that pretty quickly stops being a safe suburb and starts mirroring the vast moral emptiness that Walt begins to inhabit. Precisely. So let's just jump right into that point of no return. We'll start with part 1, the catalyst and consequences. This covers seasons 1 and 2, which detail that initial moral breakdown and the psychological shockwaves that follow.
Season 1 is really all about the foundations of that collapse. It's driven by the pressure of mortality and this desperate need for a financial legacy. But even before the cancer hits, we have to look at the man himself. At 50 years old, Walt isn't just stable, he's stagnated.
Totally stagnated.
He's a brilliant MIT-level chemist who's ended up teaching uninterested high schoolers. And to compound that indignity, he's working part-time at a local car wash.
And that indignity is the key.
Yeah.
The sources really emphasize that Walt's existing psychological framework was just one of simmering resentment. He had to wash the cars of his own wealthy, careless students. He was ignored at home, professionally sidelined, and he just felt emasculated. This was the tinderbox.
And then the match is struck. The diagnosis. Inoperable stage 3 lung cancer with a 2-year prognosis. And this catastrophic event, it acts like a chemical agent that finally dissolves the bonds of social inhibition.
Right. The fear of death paradoxically makes him feel truly alive for the first time in decades.
So his search for a solution leads him not to medicine, but to a ride along with his brother-in-law, Hank, who's a DEA agent.
And there he sees his opportunity fleeing the scene of a bust. Jesse Pinkman, a former student and, small-time drug dealer. But Walt doesn't just see a criminal.
No, he sees a distributor.
He sees a distributor. It's an immediate, pragmatic calculation. Walt knows he has the superior chemical talent, the art as he sees it, and Jesse has the distribution network, the business.
Combining them is the only path he sees to securing the truly massive amounts of money he thinks he needs to leave his family secure.
But that initial phase is just pure, volatile chaos. Their first lab is a rusty RV out in the desert. The first encounter with the underworld, specifically Crazy 8 and his associate Emilio, it just immediately spirals out of control.
And Walt is forced to rely on his core expertise, on his chemistry. He generates phosphine gas to incapacitate them and, save his own life.
But the real inflection point, the psychological moment where Mr. Chips really begins to die, comes a bit later in the episode in the bags in the river. Crazy 8 is imprisoned in the basement, and Walt faces this choice: murder or freedom.
And this scene is so profoundly analyzed in the sources because it shows Walt trying to apply his scientific, rational mind to morality. He literally creates a detailed pro-con list.
Yeah, he's trying desperately to find a loophole, a rational justification for not committing murder. He's still fighting that transformation.
And then comes the element of necessity. Walt attempting to feed Crazy 8, he's lightheaded, and he accidentally drops and breaks a ceramic plate.
He cleans it up, but when he comes back down later, he realizes a piece of the shard is missing. And the realization is just terrifying and unavoidable. Crazy 8 intends to use that shard to kill him the moment Walt unlocks that bicycle lock.
That certainty of pending death forces Walt across his first definite, irreversible moral boundary. The scene is physically brutal. He strangles Crazy 8 with the bike lock.
And the sources all emphasize he is crying the entire time. It's a violent, painful birth of this monstrous persona. He murdered not out of passion, but out of calculation and self-preservation, and he hated himself for it.
Once that barrier is broken, the next step is, well, he has to adopt the armor of a criminal. Walt and Jesse need high-volume distribution, which leads them to the psychotic, volatile crime boss, Tuco Salamanca,
who promptly beats Jesse half to death and steals their product, basically testing Walt's mettle.
This is where Heisenberg emerges. Walt doesn't go to the police. He shaves his head. He's already bald from chemo, which adds this visual layer of implacable aggression, and he adopts this cold, threatening persona. He uses the name of Werner Heisenberg,
the father of the uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics. It's perfect.
And he confronts Tuco, not with a gun, but with a highly unstable chemical explosive, mercury fulminate. By destroying Tuco's office in this massive explosion, Walt achieves two things immediately. One, he gets his payment.
And two, and this is more important, he establishes his reputation as a completely unpredictable, dangerous force. A man who uses brains over muscle. He literally explodes his way onto the criminal stage, and that sets the tone for his entire career.
That success immediately propels us into Season 2, where the sources detail the rapid onset of the butterfly effect, the causality that proves Walt's actions can't be contained.
The immediate fallout is massive. Walt and Jesse are kidnapped by Tuco, taken to this isolated desert house with Edgar Salamanca, Tuco's invalid uncle.
And the subsequent shootout, orchestrated by Hank, ends with Tuco's death.
So now Walt faces the immediate problem of explaining his extended disappearance to his family. And the answer is this bizarre and tragic deception, the dissociative fugue.
He appears naked in a supermarket, claiming amnesia. It's a complex, conscious lie that creates the first major irreparable fissures in his marriage with Skylar.
And this marks a shift, right? The lies are no longer about protecting his family from the outside world. They're about protecting his criminal ego from his family.
The operation has to professionalize. Their associate, Badger, gets arrested, and they need better insulation. This introduces us to Saul Goodman,
the criminal lawyer, the ultimate consigliere, specializing in navigating that gray area between legitimacy and illegality. Saul is the necessary middleman who formalizes their criminal existence.
And Saul is the connection that takes them straight to Gustavo Fring, a man who is the complete antithesis of the chaotic Tuco. Gus is sophisticated, cautious, methodical.
And he runs an operation hidden in plain sight. But before Walt integrates into the corporate structure of Los Pollos Hermanos, the personal chaos reaches this devastating, tragic peak with Jane Margolis.
Jane is Jesse's girlfriend. She's a tattoo artist and a recovering addict. And Jesse's guilt over the first murders, it drives them both into this deep descent into heroin use.
Jane, realizing Walt's desperation and his wealth, she blackmails him for Jesse's share of the money. And this action sets the stage for the crucial, dark moral pivot in the episode Phoenix.
Walt arrives at Jesse's house to try to reason with him, and he finds the couple passed out from heroin. Jane is sleeping on her side. As Walt moves to check on Jesse, she accidentally rolls onto her back.
And due to the drugs, she begins to choke on her own vomit.
The sources really emphasize the gravity of this deliberate inaction. Walt's first instinct is paternal. He runs to help her.
He stops. In that moment of paralysis, he calculates. Jane is a threat to Jesse's life through the drugs, and she's a threat to his business through blackmail. So he steps back, and he watches her die.
This is the definitive moment where the analysis suggests Mr. Chips fully dies. Crazy 8 was a necessity for survival. Jane was a calculated sacrifice for power and control.
He actively allows a human being to die, cementing his willingness to sacrifice others for his own self-interest, justifying it as saving Jesse.
And the chaos immediately escapes containment in the most cosmic way possible. Jane's father, Donald Margolis, is an air traffic controller.
Right.
Grief-stricken and distracted by his daughter's sudden death, he commits an error that causes the mid-air collision of two airplanes, Wayfarer 515, directly over Albuquerque.
And the season ends with the visual weight of that chaos just raining down.
Yeah.
shattered debris, body parts, and that horrifically burned, one-eyed pink teddy bear falling into the White family pool.
It's the perfect symbolic representation of Walt's corruption infecting the innocent civilian world around him. His secret life is now causing widespread public devastation.
And that sets a grim, grim tone for the next stage. So let's move into part 2, the corporate war and total victory, which covers seasons 3 and 4. This is where the criminal enterprise scales up and the protagonists transform from desperate amateurs into, well, industrial killers.
Absolutely. Season 3 is the defining transition from small-time crime to industrialized manufacturing, all under the strict, watchful control of Gus Fring.
And the home life, it just continues to fracture. Skylar learns the full truth, and initially, she demands a divorce.
But she quickly transitions into this reluctant, pragmatic complicity. She realizes how severe their situation is and decides the only way to protect her children is to properly control and launder the blood money.
The sources detail Skylar's transformation from victim to a strategic accomplice. She uses the elaborate cover story of Walt's gambling addiction to legitimize the massive, inexplicable wealth. She becomes the necessary financial stabilizer for the enterprise.
She enters the darkness.
She does, but for what she sees as a practical necessity.
Meanwhile, Gus Fring officially brings Walt into the big leagues. It's a $3 million contract for 3 months of work and access to the super lab. This state-of-the-art facility hidden beneath an industrial laundry. This is the moment Walt embraces corporate crime.
He accepts, but he makes a key non-business decision. Gus assigns him this talented, meticulous chemist, Gail Boetticher, as his partner. But Walt insists on replacing Gail with Jesse.
Right. And there are multiple layers of analysis for this choice. First, Walt wants to keep Jesse in line, keep him loyal. Second, and this is crucial at the time, he wanted to neutralize the threat of Jesse suing Hank.
After Hank violently assaulted Jesse in a fit of misplaced rage.
Exactly. So keeping Jesse close was a way to manage all his existing problems.
The conflict escalates very quickly after that. The cousins, Lionel and Marco Salamanca, arrive seeking revenge for Tuco's death. Gus, recognizing Walt as irreplaceable, that 99.1% pure product, he decides to protect his investment.
And Gus masterfully redirects the assassination. He points the cousins toward Hank, the actual killer of Tuco, not Walt.
Hank is ambushed in a parking lot, and though he survives after this incredibly brutal fight, he's left grievously injured and temporarily paralyzed.
This is a major casualty directly resulting from Walt's criminal success. His professional relationship with Gus now requires sacrifices from his family, even if it's indirect.
But the ultimate fracture point between Walt and Gus comes later, and it's driven by Jesse's conscience. Jesse discovers this horrifying truth. Gus's dealers used the 11-year-old brother of his girlfriend Andrea to kill Combo, and then they murdered the boy himself to silence him.
Jesse is just pushed past his breaking point. He attempts to take vengeance, but Walt, seeing his entire operation about to collapse, he intervenes in the most brutal way possible.
He runs over the two dealers with his Pontiac Aztec and executes a surviving dealer with a point-blank shot, simply ordering Jesse, "Run."
This action is a fundamental shift in Walt's use of violence. He is now the aggressor, choosing immediate, brutal force to protect his business and his partner, but this puts him in open war with Gus.
Gus recognizes Walt is now volatile, a liability. He needs a replacement. Gail Boetticher is rapidly perfecting the formula, and Walt realizes to survive, he has to eliminate Gail.
And he forces Jesse to commit the unforgivable. Jesse, trembling, is forced to execute Gail.
That scene, with Jesse pulling the trigger, it's the definitive tragic fracture of Jesse's soul. Walt forces Jesse into absolute moral darkness just to save his own life. It's a staggering act of self-preservation that binds Jesse to him through this shared unforgivable guilt.
And that sets the scene for Season 4, which is widely considered the pinnacle of the Cold War, this mortal chess match between the two titans, Walt and Gus.
And Gus makes the first definitive move to establish dominance.
The season opens with the iconic, horrifying box cutter scene. Gus kills his own man, Victor, who dared to start cooking the meth himself right in front of Walt and Jesse.
The analysis of this scene is just crucial. It's not just murder. It's a cold, calculated political execution. The message is simple, and it's delivered silently. Failure and arrogance will not be tolerated.
Nobody is indispensable. They're only alive because Gus deems them necessary. Gus is the ultimate corporate leader who maintains control through calculated terror.
Gus and Mike Ehrmantraut then implement this brilliant strategy to separate and conquer the partnership. Mike takes Jesse on money collection rounds, validating his skills, treating him professionally, giving him purpose.
And Jesse begins to see Gus as this functional, alternative father figure, which leaves Walt isolated, paranoid, and increasingly desperate for control.
But what is truly fascinating about Gus is the analysis of his single motivation: vengeance. Through these strategic flashbacks, we learn his entire persona, his entire successful enterprise, was built as a decades-long plan to avenge the murder of his partner, Max.
Who was killed by Hector Salamanca under the orders of Don Eladio, the cartel leader.
Exactly. Gus finally executes this masterful long-term plan. He travels to Mexico, and using poison Zafiro and Yeho tequila, he eradicates Don Eladio and the entire cartel leadership. And he keeps Hector Salamanca alive just long enough to torture him with the news that his entire lineage has been exterminated.
Meanwhile, back in Albuquerque, Walt's world is just collapsing psychologically. He plans to disappear, but discovers Skylar, in a desperate attempt to prevent an IRS audit that would expose their money laundering, has given most of his hard-won money to her former boss, Ted Benicki.
And this triggers the famous crawl space scene, a total psychotic break. Walt descends into this maniacal, deranged laughter beneath his house while the camera pulls away, trapping him in the frame.
The sources interpret this as his complete loss of control. He's a man trapped in a hole of his own making, unable to secure the very thing, the money, that drove him to this point.
But the truly unforgivable act, the definitive final betrayal of Jesse, comes next. To win Jesse back to his side for the inevitable final confrontation with Gus, Walt commits the unthinkable. He poisons Andrea's son, Brock, using lily of the valley, a common garden plant that mimics ricin poisoning.
The sheer calculation is just chilling. Walt frames Gus, making Jesse believe Gus used ricin to poison the boy, thereby manipulating Jesse's love and loyalty into pure rage.
Enraged and completely fooled, Jesse immediately allies with Walt again, setting the stage for the explosive final confrontation face-off. Walt understands that Gus's armor is impenetrable, except for one single: human vulnerability.
His burning, decades-old hatred for Hector Salamanca.
Walt convinces the invalid Hector to collaborate in a spectacular suicide bombing. Hector agrees to lure Gus to the nursing home under the guise of informing the DEA. Gus arrives, preparing to inject Hector with poison as a final act of vengeance.
But Hector detonates the bomb Walt had installed in his wheelchair, and the visual climax is iconic, unforgettable, and profoundly symbolic.
Gus walks out of the room, calmly adjusting his tie, before the camera reveals half his face has been explosively destroyed. He adjusts his tie one last time before he collapses, dead.
It's the ultimate Pyrrhic victory. The careful, calculated corporate kingpin is destroyed by the wild, volatile ego of Heisenberg. Walt calls Skylar and delivers that chilling summary: "I won!"
He won the war, but the cost was astronomical, paving the way for the final stage. We move into Part 3, detailing the King's Fall and the aftermath, covering Season 5. This is the rapid, irreversible descent into tyranny and destruction.
Right. With Gus gone, Walt is free from his previous master. He, Jesse, and Mike form a new alliance to clean up the mess, and their first collaborative action is a stroke of technological genius.
The industrial magnet truck?
Exactly. Destroying the evidence on Gus's laptop by using this powerful magnet to wipe the hard drive right through the police evidence room wall.
They establish a new mobile production system using a fumigation company, Romano's Pest, as a legitimate cover, cooking meth inside these tented suburban houses.
And this mobile empire allows Walt's hubris to just peak. This is the era of say my name, the demand for recognition and dominance. He believes he is invincible.
That arrogance leads directly to tragedy. The high-stakes methylamine train heist, which is a brilliant technical operation, it ends when their new associate, the deceptively polite Todd Alquist, kills a child who witnesses the theft.
The sources pinpoint this as the critical moment of moral divergence among the new partners. Walt, now utterly cold, he just accepts the killing as a necessary business evil.
But Jesse and Mike are repulsed. And that marks the final stage of their internal breakage from Walt.
Jesse and Mike want out. When Mike refuses to provide the names of Gus's men in prison, Walt, in a fit of rage driven entirely by ego and the paranoia of not having total control, shoots and kills Mike.
And this murder is analyzed as uniquely senseless. Mike, the cynical professional, he operated under a professional code. Walt kills him not for business necessity, but because his ego was wounded by Mike's refusal to respect his authority. It's the purest expression of Heisenberg's absolute tyranny.
The descent into absolute power is then complete. Walt hires Jack Welker's neo-Nazi gang to consolidate his position, simultaneously assassinating 10 imprisoned men across 3 prisons in a breathtaking 2-minute sequence. He is now the supreme drug lord, unchallenged.
At home, Skylar is terrified. She's living with a monster. She tries one final act of intervention, showing him an incalculable mountain of cash piled in a storage unit, and she asks the ultimate existential question: how much is enough?
And Walt, having reached the height of his power, finally agrees to retire.
But retirement, a quiet ending, it's impossible. Part B of Season 5 is the legendary Ozymandias sequence. And the catalyst for his ultimate total downfall is ridiculously simple. Hank finds a copy of Walt's Leaves of Grass in the bathroom, with a dedicated inscription from Gail Boetticher to WW.
The realization the monster he has been chasing, Heisenberg, is his brother-in-law who sits at his dinner table. It hits Hank like a physical blow. The irony, the sheer scope of the betrayal is just overwhelming.
Hank launches a secret investigation. Jesse, having finally definitively realized that Walt poisoned Brock, allies with Hank, they lure Walt to the desert location to Hudgy Lee where he buried his $80 million. And Hank successfully arrests Walt.
But fate and Jack Welker's gang intervene. The resulting gun battle leads to the most shattering moment of the entire series. Jack's gang executes Hank right in front of Walt.
The sources describe this as the fatal collision of reality. Hank, who believed in the black and white world of law and order, is executed by the sheer, unbridled brutality of the criminal world Walt unleashed. And Walt, in turn, just collapses, having lost the one person in his life who, despite their differences, genuinely loved him.
He loses everything in that moment. Jack's gang steals all the money, leaving only one barrel for Walt. In his final destructive act of vengeance against Jesse, Walt reveals that he stood there and watched Jane Margolis die.
And Jesse is taken prisoner, forced to cook meth as a slave for Jack's operation.
Walt attempts to flee with baby Holly, but the sound of her crying out, "Mama!" forces the truth onto him. He has completely lost his family. He returns her, fleeing alone to New Hampshire, isolated, dying of cancer, and infamous.
Months later, terminal and alone, Walt returns for his final reckoning, which is detailed in the finale. Felina.
The title itself is an anagram for finale, but it's also chemically and symbolically rich. Fe, iron for blood; Li, lithium for meth; Na, sodium for tears. It is the final synthesis of his life.
He performs two final strategic acts. First, he secures his remaining money for his son by using the sophisticated threat of fake assassins, Gretchen and Elliot, to force his former partners to deliver the cash to Walter Jr. on his 18th birthday.
And second, his final confession to Skylar. This is the moment he finally sheds the pretense of, "I did it for the family."
And he admits the ultimate terrifying truth of his ego. I did it for me, I liked it, I was good at it, and I was truly alive.
His end comes at Jack's complex. Using a masterful M60 machine gun trap mounted in his trunk, Walt kills Jack's gang. He's mortally wounded, but he saves Jesse, who flees in the El Camino, finally free.
Walt dies in the super lab, the place where he was truly alive, affectionately touching the chemistry tanks as the police arrive, the song Baby Blue playing him out. He died a king, albeit a destroyed one.
To truly appreciate the scale of this tragedy, we should probably briefly place the main action, which happened between 2008 and 2010, in the context of the larger narrative universe that has expanded around it.
Right. The prequel, Better Call Saul, takes place roughly between 2002 and 2004. It details the transformation of Jimmy McGill into Saul Goodman and establishes the deep context of the Gus Salamanca War, Mike's backstory, all the systemic corruption they navigate before Walt even enters the picture.
And the sequel, El Camino, takes place immediately after the finale in 2010. It focuses entirely on Jesse's flight to Alaska and provides him, the character who suffered the most, with the necessary moment of closure and freedom.
Now that we have the full chronological framework, let's shift gears a bit for Part 4. Psychological deep dive and visual storytelling. We really have to analyze the fundamental why behind these transformations and the genius of the show's visual language.
Absolutely. The complexity of Walter White extends so far beyond just a desperate man with cancer. The analysis focuses heavily on him being a study in repressed ego and profound hubris. We have to understand that the cancer didn't cause the change. It released the monster that was already there.
The sources strongly suggest the root of his desire for an empire lay in the festering bitterness over having sold his share of gray matter technologies decades earlier. He watched his former friends, Gretchen and Elliot, become billionaires based on his brilliant work.
That sale was a financial mistake, sure, but more importantly, it was a profound psychological wound. It defined his need for validation, his desperate drive to prove to the world and to himself that he was not just smart, but a success. He needed to reclaim his genius and, crucially, his power.
And that fueled his desire to feel truly alive.
Then you have Jesse Pinkman, who functions as the true moral barometer of the series. His arc is just defined by continuous tragedy and his desperate search for a functional father figure. Walt, Mike, Gus, all of whom ultimately manipulate, abuse, or abandon him.
And unlike Walt, who becomes numb to the violence, Jesse feels the immense, overwhelming weight of every single death. Gail, the boy on the bike, Andrea. He's a criminal, yes, but his humanity is always present, which is why his eventual freedom in the wilderness is the only true hopeful note in the whole tragedy.
Let's consider Gustavo Fring. He's the mirror image of what Walt strove to be. Gus was a model criminal, sophisticated, invisible, and seemingly without ego, the ultimate professional.
Yet his demise proves he was human after all. For a man so calculating, his single human vulnerability, that burning personal hatred for Hector and the love for his deceased partner, Max, was the precise point Walt exploited.
His careful calculation was ultimately undermined by his personal need for vengeance. It proves that even the most meticulous planning can be shattered by powerful human emotion.
In Mike Ehrmantraut, the professional cynic, his whole existence operates under this strict, although anti-ethical professional code. His focus, which we get from his detailed backstory in Better Call Saul, is purely on providing for his granddaughter. Mike represents the cost of professionalism, a man who has suppressed all morality except for loyalty to family.
And Mike's final error, his fatal mistake, was failing to grasp the sheer volatility and the monumental, toxic ego of Walter White. Mike was killed for disrespect, not for business.
Beyond the character analysis, the series used this deliberate and consistent language of color and symbolism to communicate the moral decay occurring just beneath the surface. The creators used a rigorous color scheme to reflect the characters' emotional and moral states.
Take Walt. He starts in colors representing stagnation and money greens and beiges. As his moral darkness takes over and his confidence swells, he moves into the black of the Heisenberg hat.
And his final, poignant choice of clothing, reflecting his clothes from the pilot episode, explicitly signifies the closing of the cycle of his life.
Skylar's color arc is particularly fascinating. She begins in cool blues and whites, symbolizing a certain suburban purity and emotional coldness. But as she's forced into complicity, laundering the blood money, her clothes gradually deepen and darken.
Right, reflecting her corruption and her new status as a strategic, albeit terrified, player in the criminal world.
Jesse's evolution is shown through color fading. Initially, he wears this chaotic, vibrant clothing, yellows, reds, bright patterns representing youth and danger. But as he becomes emotionally scarred and emptied by the violence and guilt, his wardrobe severely fades into muted grays and blacks.
He's drained of color. It perfectly reflects the state of his soul.
And Marie, always draped in purple, symbolizing royalty or maybe a profound disconnection from the harsh realities of the desert and the drug trade. She only truly shifts to the colors of mourning dark gray and black when Hank is confirmed dead or in immediate danger.
It shows her detachment from the main drama until it brutally touches her life. And Hank himself stays consistent, favoring action and danger colors like orange and browns.
The visual symbolism is so layered and intentional, and we need to spend some time on the powerful moments. The sources constantly highlight the power of that burnt, one-eyed pink teddy bear that crashes into Walt's pool at the end of season 2.
Oh, that bear. It's so much more than just debris. That bear, a child's toy, represents innocence violently destroyed by Walt's burgeoning criminal empire. The fact that it's one-eyed is crucial. It's blind to the reality of the destruction, yet physically damaged by it. It's a recurring motif of contaminated innocence.
And here's where the deeper connection comes in. Walt keeps the bear's detached eye, and this is interpreted as a physical manifestation of his guilt, or maybe the eye of God watching his sins unfold.
And what's truly incredible is the visual connection that foreshadows the finale of season 4.
Yes, the visual damage to Gus Fring's face after the bomb explosion deliberately mirrors the burns and half-destroyed appearance of that pink bear.
The analysis is that this serves as a long-term visual foreshadowing. The image of destroyed innocence returns for vengeance, and the meticulous kingpin who tried to control the chaos is destroyed by the very nature of that chaos, which Walt unleashed.
We also have to dedicate a moment to the infamous episode Fly in season 3. Walt becomes pathologically obsessed with killing a single housefly in the superlab, convinced it will contaminate his product.
This fly is not just a plot device, it's a profound psychological symbol. It symbolizes Walt's overwhelming, suffocating guilt over Jane's death. The inability to eliminate the physical contaminant reflects the irreversibility of his moral contamination. He can't clean his lab, just as he can't clean his soul. The loss of control drives him to the brink of confession.
That detail about the mirror imagery between Gus and the bear is just staggering. It shows the genius level of design in every single frame. Let's wrap this up with Part V, focusing on the fascinating intersection of science, production lore, and the series' enduring legacy.
While the chemistry was central to the series' identity, we have to acknowledge that for dramatic purposes, some significant liberties were taken with the science. This was often in consultation with chemist Dr. Donna Nelson, who guided the plausible elements while accepting the necessary dramatic myths.
Let's start with the most persistent myth, blue meth. We all associate Walt's product with that vivid, pure color.
But chemically speaking, pure methamphetamine is colorless or white. The sources confirm that a blue color would actually indicate impurities, not the legendary 99.1% purity that Walt achieved. That blue color is pure dramatic fiction designed to mark his brand.
Then there's the hydrofluoric acid scene in Season 1, used to dissolve a body and the bathtub, while HF is highly corrosive and extremely dangerous.
The speed at which it dissolves a ceramic tub in the floor is scientifically exaggerated. The famous Mythbusters test confirmed that the tub remained largely intact. The show significantly ramped up the dissolving power for visual shock.
And the scene used to establish Heisenberg's reputation with Tuco, the mercury fulminate explosion, also a myth, apparently.
Yeah, the crystal Walt throws would have needed to be significantly larger and thrown with much more force to detonate. And crucially, if it had detonated, the shockwave should have resulted in severe injury or death for everyone in the room, including Walt, rather than just property damage.
However, not everything was fabricated. The chemical formula C10H15N and the molecular weight 149.24 shown in the opening titles are scientifically accurate for methamphetamine.
That attention to detail gave the show a core of technical credibility.
And the ingenuity Walt employs in Season 2's 4 Days Out, constructing a temporary battery to start the RV using coins, zinc, and sponges.
That is theoretically correct basic electrochemistry, a technique that leverages his brilliance. Though experts suggest it's unlikely to generate enough amperage to actually turn over the RV engine, the concept itself is plausible.
Now let's consider the production trivia, the stories that make you realize how easily this masterpiece might never have happened.
The sources confirm the near-universal rejection Vince Gilligan faced when pitching the series.
Gilligan pitched the series to HBO, Showtime, TNT, and FX. All of them refused. The meeting with HBO was notoriously bad, described by Gilligan as the worst meeting ever, with the executive seeming completely uninterested in the premise of an anti-hero who only gets worse.
It is astonishing to think what the television landscape would look like if AMC hadn't taken that risk.
Even the casting of the lead role was a massive uphill battle. AMC initially rejected Bryan Cranston, knowing him solely as the hilarious goofy father from Malcolm in the Middle.
They pushed hard for established dramatic actors like John Cusack or Matthew Broderick.
Gilligan had to actively campaign for Cranston, going to great lengths to show the executives his dramatic capabilities, specifically highlighting his chilling performance in the X-Files episode Drive, an episode Gilligan himself wrote. That one performance was the evidence needed to convince them of Cranston's depth.
And Jesse Pinkman, the character who becomes the moral core of the series, was nearly eliminated entirely. He was originally slated to die in episode 9 of season 1.
The 2007-2008 writer's strike intervened, shortening the season. This unexpected break gave the creators time to realize that the raw, irreplaceable chemistry between Cranston and Aaron Paul was essential to the show's dynamic. Killing Jesse, they concluded, would have been a colossal mistake.
Other iconic moments were pure genius or just luck. The famous scene in season 3 where Walt, in frustration, throws an entire pizza onto the roof of his house.
Was performed by Bryan Cranston in a single, unscripted take. No special effects, just perfect aim and frustration.
And perhaps the most devastating moment of unplanned genius involved baby Holly in the episode Ozymandias. When Walt kidnaps her, she spontaneously calls out, "Mama!"
That sound was not scripted. The baby's mother was on set, and the child reacted naturally. The sources highlight that Cranston's subsequent distraught reaction to that genuine natural sound amplified the scene's emotional devastation exponentially. It captured a moment of raw reality amid the high drama.
Finally, let's revisit the Easter eggs and foreshadowing that demonstrate the writer's incredible foresight across the series' architecture.
The titles of the 4 Season 2 episodes featuring the black and white flash-forwards. Episodes 1, 4, 10, and 13 form a prophetic phrase. 737 down over ABQ, foretelling the plane crash months before it happened.
That level of meta-narrative structural planning is just exceptional.
We already mentioned Felina being an anagram for finale, but its relationship to the Marty Robbins song El Paso is equally compelling. The song is about a gunslinger dying in the arms of his love.
Mirroring Walt's final affectionate moment touching the chemistry tanks in the lab.
And those GPS coordinates where Walt buried his $80 million, they don't point to a secret desert location. If you punch them into a map, they point in real life to the Q Studios in Albuquerque where the series was filmed.
Placing the truth of his criminal empire right back where it was created, in the studio.
And the perfect visual closure. In the pilot episode, Walt famously loses his pants in the desert while cooking meth for the first time. In the final, shattering episode, Ozymandias, when Walt rolls his last barrel of money, the pair of pants seen lying in the desert are a direct visual reference to the pants he lost years earlier.
It symbolizes the full, closed cycle of his life and his transformation. Breaking Bad achieved the Guinness World Record as the highest-rated show, fundamentally redefining TV narrative by allowing its protagonist to pursue a trajectory of total moral malignancy without forcing a convenient or unearned redemption.
We've traced his entire journey, from a deeply repressed high school teacher whose dignity was eroded, to a murderous, ego-driven kingpin who sought power and validation above all else. His quest wasn't really about money or family, it was about feeling truly alive.
And Walt's final, honest admission to Skyler was that he did everything because he liked it and was good at it. Given the monumental chaos, the scores of deaths, and the destruction of two families driven by his choice, we leave you with this final provocative thought for your own reflection.
What stands out to you as the single, irreversible moment where Mr. Chips definitively died and Scarface took over? Was it the necessary murder of Crazy Eight, or the calculated, deliberate inaction of letting Jane Margolis choke? Consider the implications of that choice as you reflect on this deep dive.